I get mostly positive comments on this channel, but I got this one interesting one a while ago after I posted the video with this thumbnail. Now, YouTube censored the comment automatically because of language, and I forgot to screenshot it before it got auto-deleted, but the comment was about this book, and that comment said, Ayn Rand. Well, good morning and hello. If you don't know anything about Ayn Rand, this won't be a history lesson, but she's a very interesting and very polarizing Russian-American writer and philosopher. She's got this philosophy called objectivism, which shows up in a lot of her fiction, and my one-sentence summary of objectivism is capitalism applied to all of life, including personal relationships. Kind of crazy. You can watch this interview of hers with James Day from 1974 for more information. Now, I dislike a lot of what Ayn Rand stands for. If you're wondering, I don't subscribe to objectivism. She and I have a lot of things we disagree on, and there's a lot she says that someone might well be justified in slamming the door, or slamming the book. She is, like I said, a very polarizing figure. Actually, I looked back through my comments, and every time I've mentioned or shown a copy of a book by Ayn Rand, someone has said something about it being concerning. Now, truthfully, I appreciate and understand that, and to the people who have commented, I don't take it personally, and I actually understand where you're coming from, and I think it's great to be thinking about what we're reading, and recognizing ideas we consider to be harmful, right? If we can recognize good ideas in a book so we can let them sink into our lives, hopefully we can also recognize bad ideas so we can root them out of our lives. But here's where the big misconception in reading is, and I think the misconception behind those comments. Reading is not agreeing. Let me say that again. Reading is not agreeing. Reading the words of the Communist Manifesto doesn't make you a communist, and reading the words of the Wealth of Nations doesn't make you a capitalist, and reading the words in the Gospel of John doesn't make you a Christian, and reading the words of Ayn Rand doesn't make you Ayn Rand. Now, yes, obviously it's concerning if someone is reading a book called Murder is Good and Here's Why, and they're nodding excitedly and thinking, yes, this book is my jam. But see, that's them agreeing. The reading isn't the problem. And you gotta use your own judgment here, but I think that's hopefully obvious, and I don't wanna waste time splitting hairs. Now, of course, if a book makes you uncomfortable, or you're pretty sure you'll hate it, or you're just not interested, then that's totally okay. You don't need to read it, right? We're not talking about, being fair, or giving the author a chance to see if you like it. You don't owe the author anything. We're talking about you, the reader, being allowed to seek out information without feeling the pressure of coming to a conclusion. I don't think you need a conclusion even when you finish a book, and you definitely don't need one before you read it. Trying to predict ahead of time which books will line up with your existing beliefs is, well, exhausting for one, and it's also impossible. Let's try one. Does Huckleberry Finn line up with your beliefs? How much? Which part? Which character? Does the author line up with your beliefs? How about Crime and Punishment? Do you check your beliefs against Dostoevsky? The characters? Which characters? The characters the whole time, or how they end up at the end? How much of a book has to line up with your worldview for it to be acceptable to read? On the Crime and Punishment note, Raskolnikov, the lead character, has this philosophy, at least in parts of the book, where he divides people into supermen and normal people, more or less, and he says the supermen have the right to do very immoral things, like murder, in the interest of society. People like Napoleon or Alexander the Great, and regular laws don't apply to those people. Now, hopefully you don't agree with that as a philosophical statement. Most of the characters, by the way, don't. But that doesn't mean you can't read a character say he does. When I turn a page in Atlas Shrugged, it does not mean I'm signing off in approval on every page I've read so far. Reading doesn't equal agreement or disagreement. You're not writing this. You're not signing a contract. You're reading someone else's thoughts. So if reading isn't agreeing, what is it? I'll tell you what it is. Reading is eavesdropping. It's listening through the wall to a party next door and deciding if you want to go over. And it's interesting if the people are talking about stuff you agree with, but it's even more interesting sometimes if they're talking about stuff you don't. When you listen in on a variety of conversations, when you read widely, you can start to find out what it is you actually think. So, eavesdrop, read. Read people you might not agree with. Read people you know you won't agree with. When you only read from people you agree with, whatever your belief system is, you end up in an echo chamber. And even if you're right, and you might be right, two sad things will happen. One, you'll never get any new ideas, which is a bummer, and you'll end up with a very weak genetic pool, so to speak. I don't know if you guys remember the Habsburgs, that European ruling class dynasty that inbred a lot and they married their own cousins. Yeah, that, but for your brain. And two, your own ideas actually get weaker because you're never testing them against anything else. And if you don't love the idea, right, of testing or fighting ideas, I get that too. I used to care a lot more about being right than I do now. And don't get me wrong, I think real truth is out there, and it's really important. But when I'm reading a novel or philosophical work these days, I'm mostly curious. I just want to know what's going on. I want to be informed. I have the right. You have the right to not make up your mind right here and now about what you think. You are not on live TV. You can think it over. Francis Bacon, in his essay of Studies, which I freaking love, says this, and it sums up in a sentence more than I've said in this whole video. Read not to contradict and confute, nor to believe and take for granted, nor to find talk and discourse, but to weigh and consider. So no, you don't have to go read Anthem or Atlas Shrugged. Actually, there are probably better books I would recommend ahead of them. But if you do read them, or other books that might give you the mental ick, go in remembering, you are not complicit. You're not agreeing. You're eavesdropping. Read not to contradict and confute, nor to believe and take for granted, nor to find talk and discourse, but to weigh and consider.